gentlemen, on the World Cybersecurity Summit Oman, we are on our final panel discussion, which is on cybersecurity for secure, vigilant, and resilient enterprises, modern strategies and technologies topic. Well, we're looking at talking about the chess game wherein understanding cyber criminals' mindset and behavior, defense versus offensive cybersecurity strategies for enterprises, skills and talent development for cyber warriors when you're looking at finding right people versus developing right people. Also, we're looking at talking about the advanced technologies, AI, IoT, cloud. Are they friends or enemies of the CISOs? And also another question we're looking at talking is today's cyber attacks, what we all should be ready for. Of course, the conversation could be beyond these set of topics, and we're really open to having our panelists devise on the same. Well, ladies and gentlemen, for this, we've got our eminent panelists. First up, Abdullah Al Barwani, the General Manager, Corporate Security, Omantel, Sultanate of Oman. Well, Abdullah has more than 20 plus years of experience in information technology and security management. He's a GM of the Corporate Security Division with a responsibility to establish SOC services covering both IT and telecom domain, as well as other managed security services, including security advisory. Thank you, Mr. Barwani, for joining us today. We also have Huzefa Kantawala, the head of IT, Switz International Limited LLC, Sultanate of Oman. Huzefa is a successful IT specialist. He's somebody who's achieved return on investment, which is ROI, in the 12 months for the ERP implementation, including training, BPS, and implementation. Thank you so much, Mr. Kantawala, for joining us today. We also have Mr. Fatick Hussain Al Balushi, the Chief Financial Officer, Oman Cement, Sultanate of Oman. Well, prior to joining Oman Cement, Fatick had roles in finance at Oman LNG and Oman Oil, where he worked on various P&L optimization projects. As a CFO, his role is to achieve an adequate balance of cash flows for the company, ensuring enough funds are available to cover for the risks and opportunities. Thank you so much, Mr. Balushi, for joining us today. And ladies and gentlemen, this entire conversation is going to be moderated by Sanjeev Madhavi, the Chief Digital Transformation Officer, Kimchi Ramdas LLC, Sultanate of Oman. Well, Sanjeev, a seasoned IT executive with 23 years of global experience in digital transformation, value chain innovation, new business ventures, and operational excellence across major industries in supply chain and logistics. Sanjeev is a recognized leader in turning businesses into digital enterprises and executing business transformation alongside organizational change management. Well, ladies and gentlemen, with this, we now request all our panelists to join us on the stage and screen. Thank you so much for giving us your wonderful and valuable time today. Sanjeev, it is time for you to take the live baton and have a great conversation with your fellow panelists. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Bhavna. Really appreciate, and again, a very good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to the audience and the panel members for the discussion on our topic today, cybersecurity for secure, vigilant, and resilient enterprises. We're looking at strategies and technologies in today's modern fourth industrial revolution era. We're looking at a framework towards operational technology, ICS, IoT environments. Now that the panel has been introduced, as an introductory measure, I'm just starting with a rather bleak scenario. We have bad news in the year of 2020. Oman witnessed a total of 417,000 attacks on the Sultanate cyberspace. These were reported and handled. If I were to give you the good news beyond that, it was that this figure was 14% lower than what was as compared to 2019, which was 483,000. This is all reported as per the Ministry of Transport, Communications and Information Technology. Now, out of these 417,000, 1,461 actual incidents were recorded in government institutions, key vital sectors, and also by individuals who actually dealt with them successfully. So this is again 18% lower as compared to 2019. So in general, we see that there is a healthy statistic. It's an increasingly encouraging statistic for Oman. We do see brazen cyber attacks, even now in 2021 Q1 on private and government institutions. So this is where this session assumes a very strong, significant, impact in terms of driving the right ideas, the right strategies, the tools, the initiatives and technologies in order to make Oman's cyberspace safer for all. As part of the panel discussion, we'll be looking at 5 different challenge areas, which we see are very, very integral to coming up with an answer to what our problem is. The first challenge area we're trying to address is around the chess game of understanding the cyber criminals' mindset and behavior. So I'm sure most of us are well aware that we're looking at hacker personas, we're looking at offender profiling, and we're trying to figure out how are we trying to look at the next attack, what is their idea, what is behind these attacks, and what are they trying to look at. So at this stage, let me try to bring in our first panelist, Mr. Abdullah Barwani, and I would like to hear from him on how he thinks we can look at understanding the criminal mindset and behaviors, especially from an Oman perspective. Abdullah, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sanjeev. Thanks for the introduction. And indeed, it's been a very tough year, and looks like we are continuing in 2021 with the same challenges we had back in 2020. There are negative points, as you rightly mentioned, where we see an increase in attacks, especially on the DDoS and the phishing attacks. Even in signaling, for the telecom operators, we see an increase not less than 40% on the attacks. But this is, again, it's a worldwide. So back to the topic. I think, yes, it is very, very interesting dilemma. And it is very important for security professionals to understand how the black hackers, if you will, black hat hackers think, and how they attack systems in order for the defenders to understand the technical and the policy controls they need to implement in place. So it has been, I think, a traditional style of many of the big players in the market to hire hackers because they understand the game, they understand how these systems are being penetrated, they understand how to find the weaknesses and take advantage of these weaknesses. So major companies hire hackers basically to identify these vulnerabilities before the bad guys do and to implement the required controls for those. But it's been very interesting also to see this develop in more of a business and economical sense. Where, as we know now, also the dark web economy is expected to reach $10 trillion by 2025. So that's going to be, the third largest economy in the world after China and the United States. So with that, the formula has changed now, where the incentive for the black hat hackers to get into this business and to benefit as a business out of this. It's getting more complex, where we see state-sponsored attacks, initiatives, projects utilizing the underworld and the dark web for their own political and economical agendas. So now the world has changed of having a clear black and white hat hackers into the gray area, where it's very difficult to even understand who is a friend and who is a foe anymore. So this is in general, the situation. And for organizations such as Omantel and many big organizations, of course, around the world, you need to create this collaboration. You need to understand what's going on, in the dark web, what's going on in the underworld, what are people interested in seeing and attacking, what kind of data that they are after, basically to prioritize your initiatives and to have the right partnership, if you will, in securing your systems and knowing if you have been breached, etc., etc.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdullah. May I also request Mr. Fatick to share his views on this idea of how are we trying to look at countering this entire menace? Yeah, I think the question is about how are we trying to understand the mindset of the cyber criminals and how are we trying to understand their behavioral patterns so we can try to be ahead of the game.
See, now there is different approach to the different businesses and corporates, among which even individuals themselves, governments, and whatsoever you call it, entities. And it depends on what they are carrying of business of nature itself and the size of investment that they have at risk or size of investment that they can deploy. Some of those corporates, we've seen them in the offensive side, they are also using whatever balanced skilled approach, you maybe hiring or having outsourced, hiring being quite on permanent payroll, like red teams who are ethical hackers who can really read and imitate and also decode whatever happening around the globe and the update, because this is an ever dynamic and fast pace that evolves in like no time. Every single second you will find a very new developments, and people are trying to build new way of really creating threats and penetrating whatsoever targeted victims to cannibalize them on either ransomware or hold them captive and blackmail them by one means or another. Building alongside with those red teams, you can also have a balance of blue team who are trying to counter what might happen and bring them in place as a defenders. So usually I would say the corporate, it depends on their kind of necessities of how robust their system needs to be, how ready to their attacks, and how ready they are to invest into deploying these resources, either internally or outsource. So such a preparedness should be there, awareness and knowledge of all practitioners. Even you at the home back there as a family member, you need to educate your people, your kids who are going to the school. Don't take a USBs, try to not to having shared passwords and so on. So like these educational things into understanding how the mindset of those hackers or those kind of cyber infiltrating bodies would need to be quite countered. So I would say it's a kind of complete cycle, complete force that needs to come into force, being quite at the individual level, at the family level, at the community level, at the government level, at the corporate level, wherever you are, you need to be self-vigilant now. Earlier, we used to have the broadcasts and radios, and so people try to sniff on the news or the leak of information through telephones and so on. So now the multimedia is everywhere, technology evolving better. So we also, as I would say, which I feel it happening good in the GCC, they are creating these kind of security centers. And security centers, by creating such a masterminds who can counter any threats, help into really bringing such kind of, I would call it, awareness and being ready to defend if, God forbid, anything happens. One thing which we might lack here in the GCC and maybe in Oman is the educational system which goes into preparing youngsters into such a caliber. I think such kind of focus cybersecurity people as a high-end niche need to be quite looked at, because those people, if you, as my fellow brother Abdullah highlighted, is almost the third, I would call it, highest GDP place, but to a not an entitled nation, but to an entitled criminal mind of, or let's say, backdoor people playing it. So there's a huge amount of risk there. There's a huge investments need to be put into decoding the mind map and the mindsets of those players. One, we need to have those ethicals, the ethical players, the ethical hackers to come and support us. But it's a sizable investment that need to be put in. A long journey need to be started if it has not been started. And also it's time of consolidation. If you get to see now the governments and those quasi-government, what they are doing, they are consolidating now in order to be quite able to counter whatsoever, either downturn in economy, threats might happen on IT and security side. So they create shared services concepts wherever those pool of support and resources comes to be standing by to support and help, either on a kind of on a defensive way or even developing the offensive approach. And investing in people, is the far most important to do that, because machine, yes, you might code and do this machine learning, artificial intelligence and other, but mind of the people is the first most to understand and to bring it up to the skill, so at least we can counter anything to come.
Thank you, Mr. Fatick. Maybe may I also request Mr. Huzefa to share his views on the topic.
Okay, so well, yes, I totally agree with our friend Mr. Fatick and Mr. Abdullah that now the situation is wherein we need to have our family, we need to have our neighbors and everyone into this situation, and we need to train them on how to take this forward. So so taking this forward, I'm sure we all know what is the difference between offensive and defensive, but just in case, offensive deploys a proactive approach to security through the use of ethical hacking techniques. And I'm sure we all know that in the dark web, now these all tools are available in the market with like $1, $2. So with this by spending this $1, $2, a hacker can actually hack your email password. So we need to be very much vigilant in all these areas and take this thing very seriously. Now the other approach is defensive approach, wherein it uses a reactive approach to security that focuses on prevention, detection, and responses to attacks. That is mitigation. Okay, that sounds good, right? But there are some problems with offensive and defensive strategy. Offensive strategy, in reality, the internet is very fragile. Using it for cyber offensive or for hackback initiatives is a terrible idea. Actions and reactions can rapidly rise out of control, and our great friend AI with the automation can make it more drastically worse. Now the problems with defensive strategy, with this defensive strategies are necessary, they are not sufficient to protect an organization from all threats.
Thank you, Mr. Huzefa. I think we were again looking at our first point of challenge, which was about trying to prevent the mindset behind the cyber criminals of today. So I mean, if we were to sort of summarize that topic, again, we're looking at hacker personas here. Hacker personas are basically fictitious profiles where we are creating some observed behaviors between real hackers and actual attacks. So by building these personas, organizations can actually work on what is their best defense against a certain kind of attacks, or at least predict what they might encounter next. We can also go with offender profiling, which is what the police typically use in terms of identifying the likely suspects in the crime, or analyze the kind of patterns that we need in order to predict future offenses. So as we all know, we are all looking at the more generic, broad categories that we all try to classify hackers in. We are looking at cyber criminals who are looking at for a proper motivated financial gain. We also have activists or hacktivists. These are again people who are driven by political motivation. They're trying to make a statement around what their ideologies are. And then of course, we're looking at the third behavioral pattern, which is coming as government-sponsored network of hackers who are carrying out cyber warfare. So I think we are looking at how these three different broad categories can be understood, as well as how we can look at addressing their possible attack mechanisms that we're looking at in the future. Well, thank you so much for the panel. Now let me go back to the second challenge area that we have classified today. And I think, of course, Mr. Huzefa started by answering some of those areas themselves. We are looking at now the defensive versus offensive cybersecurity strategies. Now, I'm sure, as Mr. Huzefa rightly pointed out, we're looking at a choice between offensive, which looks like a combination of ethical hacking and other tools, vis-a-vis a defensive approach. We're looking at a lot of analytical, thought process, prevention, detection, as well as a possible hybrid of the two, where we are trying to mix both our offensive as well as defensive tactics to provide cybersecurity. I'm sure there are general common areas that lie between all these as well. So we have cyberspace laws, policies, compliance issues, which obviously are meant to define what specialists have to follow rules by and how exactly they will execute these. Now, my question back to the panel, and here I will try to bring in Mr. Abdullah again on the panel. How do you actually see a combination of these strategies we use today from your perspective as Omantel, somebody who's actually also facing cyber threats, as well as Omantel who's also maybe providing solutions on cyber threats to other organizations? How do you see this, Mr. Abdullah? I believe you unmute.
Yes, I'm back. So I mean, offensive versus defensive. It really depends which organization you work for and what are the set business objectives in that organization. So most of the public sector organization, if you will, would really focus on the defensive side of things, being the blue team, if you will, versus the red team approach. So the blue team is responsible to understand, what red team and black hat hackers have the intentions to do, etc. And the job is really to create the right strategies and to implement the right controls to defend the systems, the people, and the organization as a whole against these attacks. Of course, in doing so, like we said also in the first discussion, is that you need to understand the hacker mind, but you only need to understand the hacker mind in order to defend the system, not to attack back, if you will, because that's a completely different specialization. And like you also rightly mentioned, there are governing laws and regulations that do govern, the offensive part of cybersecurity. So I would really like to focus. I mean, as an Omantel, even with the services that we provide, more on the defensive side of things, except for the security assessments and the penetration testings, where we have a bilateral agreement with the beneficiaries and the customers. And we try to find vulnerabilities in their systems using multiple tools, either automated or a manual way of trying to scan, or using what's called, the social engineering, where you try to find, someone with the right credentials and the right access to information, and you try to walk him into providing this information or leaking this information. So these attacks are the only exception that we, as an organization, provide in the offensive side of things. But mainly it is really on the defensive side. So for us, it's a very wide spectrum. As you know, a typical telecom organization will have fixed networks, will have mobile networks. We have IoTs, and we also have an IT-based systems and networks. So, yep, the scope is large in nature, and we have to look at every aspect of it.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah. Let us now move into the next level of challenges that we're now facing. And this is bringing the point very closer home. We're now looking at skills and talent development for our cyber warriors. So the big choice that everyone faces, finding the right people versus, developing the right set of people. And I'm sure we can consider this argument in many ways. We can look at it as a choice between the right mindset vis-a-vis the right expertise, for an organization. Or you can even consider it from an outsourcing, cybersecurity versus in-house management as another perspective. Before I ask the panel to sort of add their thoughts, I was trying to look at some of the stuff that I conducted earlier. And in terms of outsourcing cybersecurity, of course, there are several reports, especially one from EY, which points out to having 47% of companies who have outsourced their security monitoring. Because they said we are looking at outsourcing things which are very, very standard, which obviously have don't have a strong difference between company to company virtually, so it can easily be subcontract. But at the same time, I'm also considering where we see those kind of opportunities here in Oman. So again, if I may sort of bring back the discussion to the panel, may I now ask Mr. Fatick to also give his guidance on how he sees this approach being taken forward. Are we looking at insourcing? Are we looking at outsourcing? Or are we looking at first onboarding people and developing? Or are we looking at bringing them onboarded completely, all developed altogether? Mr. Fatick.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Hopefully you can hear me. Last time I was speaking, the mic was mute. This is a bit kind of a mixed approach in specific organization, and a specific organization would have a focused approach. It depends on the nature of the business, and then the strategy adapted at that specific corporate business, government body whatsoever, and how they would like to develop the resources. Because these either could be quite functionally attached as kind of CISOs, like the security in charge, or could be outsourced. Those organizations and corporates which are almost at a high risk, at a very, very kind of first quadrant threats, they will be trying to find a continuous support and around the clock team available. But it depends on the evaluation of the parameters, whether those people should be on their payroll or should be quite brought out on a kind of outsourcing if they have these kind of continuous update and streamlined, technologies, resources, hardware, software, and soft skills of the upgrade of those professionals in this arena. So you'll find some of those companies will outsource the function to the centers or the calibers who are already adept of providing these services, while other people, wherever they find a bit of strict confidential matters which might be of a high risk, that they would like to keep it in a proprietary side or to their own will self, they would like to develop people internally. But developing people internally is not much easier. There's this kind of pros and cons once you look from one perspective to another. So developing people, retaining people is also, and maintaining them at the exact high pace of changes and development in this space would need to be quite a nice, sizable investment, but a fruitful return towards the end. That's one part of it, once it comes to developing the staff and the people in place. Finding the right people exactly in the, I would call it, in specific developing countries is not much easier if you speak within the geographical parameters. But nowadays, since the globe is just one small village, you could have arranged through people who have who is sitting abroad, either being in India, being in America or Europe. But the only thing that you need to be mindful that those kind of attacks might happen from the nearby here, either within the country, from the neighbor, whatsoever it takes, that you need to be careful of. So developing in-house people and developing the right caliber, hiring the right caliber at the first instance is very most important, because selection process should be thorough. And those people who are responsible of driving such functions, related functions, securities, ITs, and even once it comes to OT technology, if there is this connectivity, either even if it is on dot line or direct reporting to the information technology, then it's very important that management and top layer of the organization need to really look into and have a proper scrutinizing process to pick the right caliber, the right candidate, and at the best possible terms. Organization among like ourselves, we are not just relying on skills and resource of people. Yes, the mindset does move it, but also systems sometimes, if you bring people and who are not well adapted to bring their kind of requirement upfront, management are put through specific awareness programs, awareness sessions, and readings, which get cascaded down to the professional people, and also comes into bottom-up approach, wherever feeds also circulate around the corporate to put everyone on the same tier of update if there is a kind of a threat. And we've seen the plenty of ransoms and the attacks happens in the last year and even the recent 2021, or similar the 2020 experience with the solar wind and how it was almost held plenty of those corporate linked to that. From this perspective, corporate need to invest into bringing the right services at the right time before anything go wrong. So such special skills to be quite available, specifically focusing on competencies like penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, monitoring solutions, being security information, and event management of the activities might happen. Those people with these skills are very important for placing securities within the corporates. Employees awareness, which we've spoken about around the 360 approach, either from top down, bottom up, is very essential even in the parameter of developing people in the ladder to go on the also higher level of responsibility, that they need to cascade such knowledge sharing, and also the corporate responsibility at sending this specific security awareness, either being now virtually as this pandemic. We wish the pandemic to elapse and vanish soon, but has brought change to the life, which is now a constant reality, using the virtual life, the virtual media, and using these kind of communication channels. This by itself created another, what do you call it, universe of go learn, go get it from the screen. You don't need to attend the university or school. It's all there. You just subscribe, you just enroll, and you are there. You understand how to do it. Very essential in this nowadays going forward, specifically developing the skills of cloud security, specifically that we have much of awareness, much of those offered solution for storage and all around. Everyone is coming right and left. Here in Oman, if you speak about cloud services, I don't know how many centers you'll have to list. And the same offers abroad, and even with those providers who are giving you either Microsoft, either Apple, either whatsoever being based there. So management and all staff and whoever, even at the nutshell of a family or the nutshell of the school, people has to be quite brought up to the right practice, that they need to be at least made aware of what might be possible threats around them, taking a kind of a small USB or clicking a kind of a phishing email, linking to that, losing your kind of whole system, being quite captive, and then eventually you might be held ransom for specific blackmail, people who will just be quite using your kind of information, either for blackmailing that you pay them, or they use it and post it for the public to use it differently. You go even, what surprised me recently in 2020, that kind of psychiatric results or records for a specific, if I'm not mistaken, was it in Finland? It's all made public for those people who have not will to come and pay. And they targeted those high net wealth people. And here we go. So there is no kind of granted security if you don't really develop the system, people, and yourself. And that's how I see it.
Thank you, Mr. Fatick. I think we can now move on to our next question, which is actually now surrounding the use of the latest advanced technologies. So I'm sure all of us are very aware that we're looking at artificial intelligence, cloud in your cybersecurity agendas, IoT devices, all these different mechanisms which are now today, the most preferred choice for everyone to invest in. The question still remains, as a chief information security officer, do you see these technologies very friendly to your approach, or you consider them not so friendly, or something which obviously is not going to be helping you with your agenda? On this topic, may I request Mr. Huzefa to sort of share his thoughts first, and then I will go to Mr. Abdullah.
Yeah, sure. Basically, AI, artificial intelligence, is a very good tool. Definitely, it's going to enhance and reduce the overheads of the organization. But also, we need to understand that AI brings a lot of responsibility with it. So we need to have the people in our organization who knows what are the drawbacks and what issues we are going to face when we implement these these AI bots and all sorts of AI.
Good. So let me also hear from Mr. Abdullah on this. I'm sure because again there are several partnerships that Omantel is already undertaking. So I'm sure he will probably throw some better light in terms of how these products are faring for him, as well as for how he's trying to use them for others. You need to unmute your.
Yeah, exactly. So when we talk about, I mean, advanced technologies, cloud is one of those, and I think cloud is almost a done deal. There's no way around cloud utilization, especially now we have most of our workforce working from either abroad and from home, and from different places other than the office. So basically, organizations don't have a choice anymore, but either they can go 100% cloud native approach, or they at least have a hybrid solution where some of the systems are on-prem, and at least the collaboration tools and the meeting platforms, etc., are being on the cloud, with also data repositories, etc. So cloud is something that has forced its way into every organization, and it is there to stay. And as it is now, we already have 50% of our data in the cloud, and I think this is going to increase, and it will go a lot higher than this. So from a security point of view, what we need to do is that we just need to ensure that first of all, this is supported by policies and regulatories. We have to create, a cloud policy by which we define what kind of data do we allow, to go to cloud, and which clouds. There must be some set of minimum requirements, either contractual or technical requirements to look for, when you are uploading or when you are consuming cloud services. So this is there, and I think it's going to grow. We just need to adopt, and we need to find smart ways how to create the right balance, between having an efficient and a very effective organization versus securing the data on the cloud. But artificial intelligence is something that is very, very interesting. And I know, in the Omani market, a lot of people are talking about it. It's becoming a buzzword. And a lot of people are starting to acquire systems with presumably, artificial intelligence capabilities. So from my point of view, I think this is still a premature market. Even from a technology point of view. And again, it depends what kind of artificial intelligence we're talking about. Is it what is called kind of assisted intelligence, by which these tools are going to help us do the day-to-day operation that we do anyways, but this can be automated, versus the augmented intelligence, where we are allowing these tools to learn our environment, to learn our behavior, and to create a baseline, and to have a mind of its own, if you will, to respond to security incidents and other tasks that we ask us to do. So very importantly is really to set the organizational objectives of having an AI to start with. So for instance, at Omantel, for instance, we have our own security operations center. And we have, many technologies and many systems that generates millions of records and alerts a day. So it is really beyond a human capacity to understand or to manually try to filter these alerts and to make sense of it. So you have to depend on such technologies, basically, to learn the right behavior versus the bad behavior, and to support the decision making, and to support in responding to security incidents, for instance, as a one use case. But with that understanding, I think organizations need to be aware is that these tools could also be very dangerous to the organization if they are not secured by themselves. So you need to secure the AI platform against the bad guys, so they don't manipulate with it. So one of the maybe worst scenarios that could happen is that for hackers to manipulate the data that you're feeding into the AI system. And hence the AI system is going to assume that this is a legitimate data and will take decisions based on a bad data, if you will. Especially when you grow so advanced to allow this artificial intelligence platforms to take actions on your behalf in an automated way, this could be very disastrous. So such precautions needs to be kept in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah. In fact, I think one of the other points which we also look at addressing in today's world is the liability part, that comes along with the cyber crimes. So again, whenever there is any live incident that happens, and how it will actually impact the organization, its financial status, its reputation, its brand, all of that put together, and how does it address it from a legality perspective. I think we have a lot of insurance related options that are now available to cover those liabilities. We can look at how we can consider a percentage of your profit, as the case in point. And I'm sure these cyber security related insurance premiums, if I call it so, are also available from most of the insurance companies today in Oman, in order to address how we can look at it as a fallout or as a fallback option in case there is something. Let me try to then look at the final culminating point from our discussion today. This is about what we should expect going into the future. So how do you see cyber attacks as well as the cyber security mechanism to be operating far ahead into the future? Let me get a minute's perspective from each of our panelists, hopefully towards closing the discussion. And I'm hoping that you can sort of give at least one or two takeaways to the audience on what they should consider, taking away from this discussion. I'll start with Mr. Fatick, and then we can have Mr. Abdullah and Mr. Huzefa. Right? Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. But a nice arching for the cyber security insurance, because I was handling insurance at the initial start of time into 2000. And I used to see this reinsurance brokers coming with their kind of proposal, why don't you buy such a cover? And I've been laughing at them, by the way, and saying that those people, they are trying to create another source of income, and they are being pushing it, but giving whatever later on we felt it and we've seen it. It's those kind of trillions of dollars moving here and there. We don't need to be standing exposed, paying a small petty premium. As the old ancestors or the old people haven't been believing in the motor insurance, now it's almost everyone is running after that. So it's a kind of, I would call it reality that we need to have it in order to minimize or mitigate possible losses and risks associated. This is only a reflection to your last statement with regarding to the liability and complication that might arise. Not is only about financial, but also on all quadrants. Now, to reflect on the final point with regard, what should we be ready for? We should be ready to build cyber resilience by all means, that all organization, small, big, or medium, they are standing vulnerable. We should always have this motto, expect the unexpected. Even if you plan, there's always a small chance that you miss corner here and there, and people find these kind of opportunities to exploit them and then penetrate, and then you are at risk. Far most important, policies and procedures, they should be quite reviewed, built up, and delivered into a more of, I would call it, customized to whatever happens and best fit. Awareness to the place to be followed, specifically in an emergency situation. Business continuity plans in the corporate and as of current need to be looked from this perspective. Have we been trained enough or not? This is also another point. I would say cyber insurance, which you've highlighted, is one way of transferring the risk, but essential one, I've seen it happening in Oman, backup strategies of the data and the information, so you don't lose them, either being quite redundant places, either on the old way of the backups or cloud. So at least you have these kind of support and reserves means once you need them. Also, we should not back out, not to call for assistance if we don't have them. Peers in the industries, governments who are there ITAs, those kind of SOCs in the place, security operation or centers that can be providing specific support could be looked at, even if it is not there here in Oman. Or you could also subscribe to the services to protect any critical infrastructure messed with. And also, we should not hesitate to engage and get the service from third-party service provider if that is the case. There's no shame to claim that I've been held captive for such, rather than you complicate the story. Some organization may have already paid bailout or blackmail ransom money that they wanted from those hackers, but sometimes the stake is bigger, hidden as like the iceberg. The tip is small, but below, those people are having more information held at hand, more threats that they can throw to you. Don't leave yourself exposed. And all the best to all people in this universe and the space to deliver support to all, among which the financial sectors and the corporates and the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fatick. Over to you, Mr. Abdullah.
So from my perspective, I think it's the cybercrime is here to stay, and it will only increase going forward because the incentive is there. The financial and the economical, political, etc. incentives are there, and so this is going to continue. For organizations, I think what they need to focus on is really business continuity, as my friend Fatick also highlighted, and developing the required skills or capabilities in incident response. At least, they can minimize the risks when they arise. And they can recover their businesses as soon as they can whenever an incident happens, because it is expected to happen. I mean, with the pace of the change that is happening now, and also the cyber crime rate that is increasing. So as a takeaway, I think focusing on the business continuity and developing the incident response capabilities will be a plus to any organization going forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Abdullah. Over to you.
Yeah, in today's world, with the data breaches and cyber attacks on the rise, make sure your business is ready for whatever might happen. Take time to secure your network, get your employees on the same page, and plan for likely scenarios now. It's better to have a plan you don't have to use them than to not have one when you really need it. Okay, before I conclude this session, before I conclude my part, I would like to give one takeaway. During our training experience for cybersecurity in one of the training institutes, we were not taught on how to defend ourselves from cyber attacks. Instead, we were being given real life examples on the incidents of cyber crimes, which we had to analyze, and based on the analysis, propose what should have been done by the company to avoid the attacks and how they should have tackled the situation to not worsen it. So take time, do research on recent cyber attacks, take it as a learning, and see if you can implement those controls in your organization. If possible, send those incidents which are happening and which you see to the users so that they can be aware of all these things.
Thank you so much, Huzefa. I think we can conclude the session. Let me just wrap it up with another couple of points from my side. I think there is going to be a significant impact with the work from home and COVID-19 coming together. More and more people working from home, and home computers and networks are definitely going to be under major threat. The second element I strongly see is that the privacy laws are definitely going to be in a mess. We will have a lot of ideas around how and where people can share and exchange data. And those points, again, are a very, very strong area of concern. We also see that identity management and multi-factor authentications will definitely grow. And of course, that is where we will see the change in terms of how password management will be approached going into the future. I think all in all, we are very, we are very clear that the advanced persistent attacks, the APTs that have been used widely again, the dark web will actually see more and more of them being made available. So again, we have to sort of look at how we can sort of advance, our preparation in order to tackle them as such. In hindsight, as digital transformation projects are growing, we see many of these plans are definitely bound to hit the roadblock because of security and cybersecurity. And it is in our interest, as all of us have noted down, to take this one step at a time and be very clear in your path and how you address them. Thank you so much to all the panel members for sharing your views, as well as to providing us your nice guidance on this topic. And I hand it back to you, Bhavna. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all our incredible panelists. Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you, Fatick. Thank you, Abdullah. And thank you, Huzefa, for joining us today at the World Cybersecurity Summit, Oman. Thank you once again.